Mike. What day is it, Mike? It's hump day. I'm sorry, I was requested to do that by, well, you guessed it, Mike. Thanks for the email, Mike. And there you go. It's hump day, brother. And by close of business today, we will be halfway through our week and moving toward a weekend. So I hope you're doing well and things are going as planned. That's easier said than done these days, isn't it? Because we're talking about change, constant, unrelenting change that I talked about on Monday. And yeah, you know what? The best leaders, and I work with leadership groups on a daily basis. And one of the common statements made, if you will, complaint, maybe to a certain degree, is that, I'm big on planning. You've got to have a journal where you plan what you want to have happen, what the timing is, the who, what, when, and where, and execution, right? It's a big part of being a leader. It's on that strategic tactical side versus the relationship side. We can't lose sight of either one of those because they're both critical to our success as leaders, right? And I was talking about, how do we get past this fear of change? And it's really a fear of the unknown. It stems from the oldest part of our brain in the limbic system, in the ancestral brain. And because it has been hardwired in human beings for thousands of years, it's able to respond and react faster than any other part of the brain. Why? Because it's warning us from something that is dangerous, right? Back in the day when our ancestors were being stalked by a lion or another predator, that brain had to click on fast and fight or flight. Boom, you're out of there. And that's competing with our neocortex, where we can rationally think, problem solve, decision make, analyze. And so that gets in our way. So as I've said before in the past, when it comes to our emotions, we've got to find a way of hitting pause. Pause. Okay, what am I afraid of here? What's going on? Is it going to kill me? No, it's not going to kill me. Okay, so what threat am I anticipating? And write it down. When you can name the feeling and name the action, what you're doing is you're pushing that energy from the ancestral brain into the neocortex, the newest part of our brain. And that is where we can do something about it. Because the scariest element, or at least one of the strongest elements of fear or change, is a lack of control. We really feel these emotions that bring us to even panic because we do not feel a sense of control. And control is important. If you had no sense of control, we'd never leave our homes. That would be a horrible thing. So in order to gain a sense of control as early as possible, we want to move that emotion by saying, wait a second, hold on, hold the phone, hit pause. What is that I'm feeling? I'm feeling anxious. What am I anxious about? Oh, this change. We're going to be converting, our editor system to a AI program. Look, guys, you've been using AI forever. It was called Google and pretty much any other search engine out there. Now, yeah, AI has really refined it and it continues to develop in many different ways. There's more AI programs out there than, we ever thought would emerge. That being said, we first have to control that emotion so we can get to the critical thinking side of what we're dealing with, if anything, right? Even good change evokes feelings of fear and anger. Look, think about it. What was your experience in the past of where a change was a bad change? I mean, a really bad change. Now, look, in our personal lives, something like the loss of a loved one or a divorce, that's radical change. That's tough to get through, but we can't manage it without wrapping our head around it. We're going to feel the emotion first, but now we've got to take control. But what about changes at work? What changes were made that were bad changes, and why were they bad? Common responses to that question were, we found out about it at the last minute. Well, that's not good. We were concerned about whether our skill sets would adapt to the change in what we were going to do. We didn't have a plan of being able to communicate, educate, and support. Remember those three during the bad change. It was chaos. That word says what? A loss of control. And that's really one of the most damaging parts of bad change, is that we do not feel like we have some level of control over it. So let's talk about good change. Good change, we could see it coming long before it hit us, long before it had its impact on us. And so we could make adjustments, right? We develop a sense of control by learning more about that we're concerned about and being able to look for the opportunities within that change. So we make change our friend. We might as well, it's not going away, right? So we've got to make sure that we look at change as objectively as we can and say, okay, we're going to be using AI as an editor, and I'm an editor, and I'm in fear of the fact that I might be losing my job. Well, look, if I can master the editor of AI, learning the proper prompts and knowing how to work with it as a tool, I become more valuable. We can look at every change and adapt. We just have to put the effort in. Now, if we look at the past, interesting stuff. I'm going to tell you a story of two towers or two cities, right? Not as long as that sounds like, but if you can remember, Kodak was the name in photography forever and ever. They even invented a digital camera, but they couldn't adapt to it. They believed that film, physical film, was the best way of photography from that point and into the future. And boy, were they wrong. I mean, it took decades really for that digital photography to get to the point where it is arguably better than that film and a lot less to process. So you're not having to buy film and then having it, processed and all that. They believed so much in the analog way of doing things that they simply wouldn't change. They were held up in that paradigm. Now, another company that I did work with was 3M. And they started out, the division that I worked with, started out with reel-to-reel magnetic tape for recording data or for recording voice and music, right? It had several uses. And their team was, we are the magnetic tape gods of the industry. Well, that sounds all well and fine, but not long after that came the 3x5 floppy disk. Now, look, I barely remember that, but anyway, UNIVAC tubes, UNIVAC computers use the reel-to-reel for memory. And then this new technology came along, and the team over at 3M kind of scratched their head and said, hey, we got to change this. It's still a form of magnetic tape, but it's different than how we used to do it. And it's easier for the user, and we got to hop on board. So they did that. They went to a 3x5 floppy. Actually, there was a 5.6 floppy first, and then it shrunk down to 3.5 as technology got more effective and efficient. And then they were like, okay, yeah, we're the disk gods of the industry. And then what happened? The small, what you can call them, thumb drives or flash drives, or we've got different words for those. They came into the picture. And we're like, oh man, you know what happened? They realized that it wasn't about magnetic tape anymore. They had to be the memory gods from a technological standpoint. When they were able to see the true value of what had been providing all along, data retention, they realized, we're the memory gods. That's who we are. And that's how they adapted to those changes. And those changes in those times were rapid, unrelenting, and paradigm shifting. So much has changed, but we have the ability to adapt if we go from that limbic system, ancestral brain, and analyze our feelings up front and look at now pushing it into the neocortex and being able to effectively be critical in our thinking, problem solving, decision making, planning. So those good changes came with a good plan. Hey, we got a heads up way ahead of time. We were provided some insight in terms of how that impacts us. And then on top of that, we also learn how to shorten the learning curve, getting support from management and leadership, getting a patient leadership saying, look, I know it's something new. It's going to take time. When we hear that, it doesn't mean that we slow down in our learning. It just means that, hey, not a lot of pressure, not a lot of pressure. We understand it's going to take time. And the reason why this is so important is that when we say, relax, take it easy, we have time, learn, then they're not all stressed out with that weight of, oh, it's got to be done by Friday. And you're like, when you're in that kind of situation, when you are experiencing those levels of emotions, of pressure and stress, we are more likely to make mistakes and it takes us longer to adapt to that change. So if we say, look, hey, we're going to give you guys support, not just in word, but show up for it, and then say, look, take your time, make sure you understand, and then teach us. You become the teachers. And that involvement created empowerment, which got the feeling of this change on a positive level. People started to feel like they had control. They had a visual plan that they could see how things were going to be implemented and when things were going to hit, and they could be prepared for it. And they were provided the support they needed. This is how good change works. And understand that, boom, the brightness of change. No, look, the stages of change in people are very much like the stages of grief. When we are leaving something that we are comfortable and familiar with, we grieve its loss. And we kind of resist, moving it to the next phase, which is the future. So in the beginning, we might feel fear and anger. What makes them think that this is going to be any better? Oh man, this is going to be like the last project where everything failed and we had to work twice as hard. We create rationale to support what we're feeling emotionally. The next thing is denial and resistance. And oftentimes this resistance, well, denial first shows up like, this will pass. I'm going to wait it out. I'm not going to deal with it. And then they'll get so tired of bugging me that they'll just drop it. Not on your life. Then the next level is resistance. Well, I'm going to passively resist. I'm going to purposely go slower in learning the new way in hopes that they'll say, oh, this is taking too long. Let's just go back to the old way. Wishful thinking once again, right? Then we go through a stage where we realize, wow, they're not going back to the old way. And this is a stage of like mourning and helplessness, maybe even almost apathy. I don't know about this change. I mean, I guess I don't have a choice. It's just hard. That support that leadership can provide these individuals, and I mean formal or informal leadership, anybody who is able to show empathy and listen to really understand what the individual is going through in terms of the change, you can provide some sense of control for them, and both emotionally and intellectually. Then they start moving to this, what we call reluctant acceptance. They're like beginning to see, well, yeah, this new way of doing things, it's going to be easier. It's going to solve some problems that we had with the old way. And although I was faster at the old way, it's not that complicated. I think over repetition, I could get this. That's when you're on the upswing. That's when you're moving toward victory. And then the last stage is acceptance and mastery. It's like, wow, this is cool. This works. Now, it's not everything, it's not all the answers that we need, but I definitely am experiencing huge benefits in comparison to the old way we used to do things. But people need to learn that on their own. They need to be able to discover it through their own perspective. Once they do, and you continue to provide support, both emotionally and intellectually, then they get that confidence level. And then we get hit with the next change. Right? So it almost moves like the diffusion of innovation, that model, where you've got the innovators, the very beginning, small population. They're the ones that come up with the change idea, and they're visionary. They can see the benefits into the future, right? And then you've got the early adopters, and they take a little coaxing, but they can see it. The idea here is you've got to give people a sense of control and a picture of the future state and a guarantee of support through that journey. That is how a good change process works. Now, there's a lot of more moving components, but we don't have 4 to 6 hours to get into that. But you can see, even in your personal life, if you are able to identify a sense of control, even if that action that you take is ineffective, it still gives you that sense of actionability, a sense of control, and it suppresses that negative, ancestral brain, that anxiety. Call somebody who's been through a similar change. Hey, what did you do? How did you handle it? Research it, find out. But that is everything I'm going to give you in today's After the Coffee. And I just want to say, thank you so much. I very much appreciate the support that you've given me. And let me know if there are topics that you're interested in. Most of the topics that we get are from people who say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Can you elaborate on that? And I'm happy to do that for you. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share. Other people need this information too. Don't hog it to yourself. And on that note, we are getting close to our weekend. So as always, lead well, my friend.